is we've created a platform so that any type of, even someone like a beginner software developer can create a drone application. And so our electronics are compatible with platforms such as DJI and 3D Robotics. And so you can create one application and run it on all of these different platforms. So for instance, someone like Jim, who's running this Swarm network, if he wants to have a specific application for his Swarm network to use, he can create an application specifically for search and rescue with all the necessary, gadgets like the FLIR camera and the Wi-Fi detector all built in, so that, maybe in the future, you don't need to be necessarily a proficient drone operator to use. So the drone will autonomously be able to do these things so that we can find more people and save more lives. This is sort of where our magic comes into play. So this is our hardware adapter that essentially a person, like a software developer, can come in, write one application for this, and be ensured that it will run on your DJI or your Pixhawk or your Walkera drone. And we've essentially simplified all the entire process of drone development.
You're the drone guy or girl in your town, and you're able to capture all the drone aerial work. But it's really about, especially in the larger markets, up in Toronto, we've seen this especially, where you want to focus on a niche, whether it's real estate, agriculture, find what you're passionate about and focus on that. And rather than having this huge list of services, what you want to do is show not just a portfolio of everything you do and this crazy demo reel, show how you're an expert at one specific field. Because as we heard from that economic analysis from Drone U, that market is going to become super saturated very, very quickly once the FAA opens up those regs. So you're gonna find if you're an everything person, there's not going to be any business out there for you.
The average TV station pays $1,300 per hour to operate a helicopter. That's not great for an industry that is hugely struggling financially, and layoffs have become commonplace once you guys all stopped buying print newspapers. But drones are a breakthrough. Suddenly, the tiniest metro paper or even a freelance journalist who is working completely for himself can afford to pay $1,200 for a DJI Phantom. They can leave it in the trunk of their car to use at a moment's notice. I'm hopeful that commercial use of drones will become legal. It's the only thing really holding drones back from being widely used to report the news.
Where is this industry going? What wonderful things are waiting for us in the next few years? And that's a great topic. However, as we think about that, and as we can't help but engage in that topic, I'd like to point out that we are not only looking to the future, but we also need to be thinking about the past. And we also need to realize that someday our present will be the past of that beautiful, hopeful, prosperous drone future we all hope to live in. So that's why I say the purpose of our topic is the past of the future of civilian drone use, because that's where we are today. So I want you to keep that in mind. And everyone in this room, I guarantee, just by the fact that you're here, you're a pioneer in this industry. It's just inevitable. There are too few of us. Someday this will be huge. Someday there'll be United Airlines, a Delta, all the rest of them, just like there are in manned aviation today. But it's just inevitable, just because we're the tiny tip of the spear right now, that all of you have an important role to play in this. So I hope maybe what we say will be of some limited value to you in understanding your role in that. Welcome you to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. It's 1903. Two bicycle repairmen named Orwell and Wilver from Ohio have just achieved the first heavier-than-air flight. So together, we're going to make the same kind of aviation history. And I think in doing that, it can be very useful for us to look back to the past, particularly the past of aviation history, and see what we can learn from those generations of aviators who came before us. Probably one of the greatest human minds of all time, at least that we have any record of, was Sir Isaac Newton, who invented trigonometry and optics and several other that are entire fields of human endeavor. One guy invented more of them, discovered gravity more or less. So very, very potent guy. And so this guy is as legitimate a genius as you can be. But he says, and I think this shows his great humility, if I have seen further than those who came before me, it's because I am standing on the shoulders of giants. He begins by acknowledging the contributions of everybody who came before him, of all the people who made careful notes and observations, even if they didn't know quite what they were getting at. They were piecing it together, and they laid the foundation for what was to come. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to look to the past and see what we can learn for the future. I think it's easy 200 years later to look back over the history of aviation, to look at, from the very beginnings up through to today, and think it couldn't have turned out any other way. There always had to be commercial airliners. All this stuff, it just had to happen. We can't imagine either way. That's not true. There were some real rough patches along the way. They were the times when this whole thing could have gone completely off the rails. And people just like us, sitting in rooms just like this, sat down and did the hard work and solved those problems. And I think it's really important for us to keep that in mind, because as we're struggling with some regulatory issue or the stupid video transmitter's not working or even the PowerPoint, we need to remember that in the past, it wasn't all smooth either. So, I'd like to suggest to you today that we learn 3 lessons from the giants who came before us. And the first lesson is bring champagne. Oh good, it says that on the screen behind me. Now, obviously these days there's an awful lot of sort of anti-drone attitudes around, and this is where I'd like to start looking at that. We, on November 21st, 1783, the first manned aviation event occurred, and that was the Montgolfier brothers in Paris, France, was the first untethered flight by a hot air balloon. Good for them, brave guys. Some of their successors, including actually Pilote, the man whose name our modern word pilot comes from, was subsequently killed flying on a hot air balloon, actually trying to get across the English Channel. So this was dicey stuff in their age. This was their moonshot. This was their right stuff era. People died doing this. In any event, so you think that would be enough, that you're risking death to pioneer aviation, good for you. But they faced a whole other threat. And I think it's almost impossible for us in the modern era to sort of conceive of this. But when we think of a hot air balloon today, it's inevitable. We think of this. It's this big, voluminous, graceful thing that sort of floats along on the sky. And I bet you couldn't think of something which have a much lower probability of hurting somebody than a hot air balloon. I mean, there's symbols of freedom and peace and all that good stuff, right? Fine, that's how we see them today in the 21st century. To a 17th century French peasant, a hot air balloon looked like that. They literally thought they were dragons, because they'd never seen anything other than a bird in the sky. They're sitting out there tending their fields, and all of a sudden this giant thing belching black smoke comes over the horizon. They'd get out their pitchforks and torches, and when this thing landed, they'd go kill it. This is not a metaphor. This happened in history. So unless your drone has come down and been stabbed by a peasant with a pitchfork, you have not had it as bad as the Montgolfier brothers. So I think we face a similar problem with drones. We say drone, we see this. This is Raven photographing some school children to help them with a fundraiser so their school can build a new gymnasium. Peaceful, benevolent, helpful. The kids loved it. Right after this flight, I took the top off Raven because the kids were desperate to see the inside, and I knelt down so they could see it. And Brian was standing back with the camera, and I disappeared. I mean, you couldn't see me. I was just swarmed. So this is how we see drones. The problem is, you say drone outside of this room, this is what the general public thinks. This is our fire-breathing dragon. If we're the Montgolfier brothers, this is what we're fighting against. So, okay, what do we do? How do we solve this problem? Well, our earliest forerunners, the French aeronauts, came up with a solution. How? Whoops, I got to get my buttons straight here. How did the early French aeronauts solve this problem? They brought champagne. Because, yeah, if a dragon came over and landed in the midst of your village, that was pretty scary. But if a fellow Frenchman came out holding aloft a bottle of champagne and offering you a glass, suddenly the dragon didn't seem so scary. So I'm going to let Brian come up here for a minute and sort of give you some thoughts on what we can do today. Obviously, plying our fellow citizens with alcohol isn't really a 21st century solution to this problem, but we do have some thoughts.
Well, what we can do as multi-rotor or drone pilots is we can basically engage the public. When we land, or even if they're watching us, engage them, let them look through the goggles, let them see what you're doing. You know, basically, the more involvement you can get, the more excited they can be about what you're doing, the more receptive they'll be to what you're doing, and the more they'll like it and go, look, you know, drones aren't these horrible things. They're really quite fun. And these guys were taking pictures of this, or they were flying over here. It's just a wonderful thing just to educate people and to show them participate in community events. We go to maker fairs and we give drone rides to kids just by the dozens and dozens of, just over somewhere. We were over like a river, so that nowhere where people could get hurt, but they really opened their eyes. I think we really helped people see what these are, what they aren't, and what we can do with them. It's definitely a really positive thing. So that's basically what we do. That's our form of champagne.
Nothing ever changes until it does. And we've actually seen some movement on this front. That's the thing about this. It moves so fast, this field, in that the FAA has put out the notice of proposed rulemaking, which is the ground is shifting a little bit under our feet. But I feel like no beyond line of sight. Some real questions about the legality of FPV conducted under any circumstances. So there's some real questions, and I think as we're struggling with the AMA for year after year, there can be a feeling that we're sort of stuck and we're not getting anywhere. I think that's a frustration probably everyone in this room can deal with. And I'm not saying that's not founded, but what I want you to come away from this understanding is that this doesn't move linearly. It's not a progress bar on your computer counting up from 1% done to 100% done. It's going to move in big jumps. So let's leap forward about 250 years from the Montgolfier brothers to the immediate aftermath of World War II. Well, actually, first, let's make a quick pit stop in the Middle Ages and meet this guy, Accursius. This guy was the legal bomb of Rome in the 13th century. This guy was the leading legal scholar of his day. And I suspect he was a very smart man, a very good man, very competent. He only had the best thoughts in mind. I don't think he was trying to sabotage us here 700 years later. He probably would have made a very good FAA administrator. In any event, to the extent we remember Accursius for anything at all, we remember him for uttering this one phrase, which is in Latin, and I don't speak Latin, and I'd welcome anyone who does in the room to jump in, but I also have a translation. For whoever owns the soil, it is theirs up to heaven and down to hell. And what this was his statement on property rights. So if you own a square acre of land, let's say, you project that upward. I guess the earth was flat back then, so project that straight upward. And that airspace and everything, out to, 700 miles where the stars were, was yours. And everything straight down to the center of the earth or hell or whatever, was yours. And that was that. And this was established black letter law. Everyone would have thought you were insane for suggesting anything different for 700 years. So if you're weary of the FAA taking a while to get to stuff, think about this, 700 years. Okay, so what happened? In 1946, there's a chicken farmer named Cosby. And Cosby has a problem in that he's got his chicken coop and the Army is flying airplanes like really, really low over his chicken coop. And I just have to read this because it's fun, not if you're Cosby, but for us many years removed. Cosby complains to the court that the military flying these planes low over his farm, causing his chickens to jump up against the side of the chicken house and the walls and burst themselves open and die. And so he sued the government on the grounds that he was entitled to compensation for his losses under the takings clause of the Fifth Amendment. He said, look, the government is taking my property. They have no right to do so. Where's my due process? These planes are, panicking my chickens and killing them. So what happens? This goes up through the courts all the way to the United States Supreme Court. What's going to happen here? And what happens is Justice Douglas writes the majority opinion and says of Accursius's principle going back 700 years, let's keep in mind, this doctrine has no place in the modern world. And why not? Because Douglas foresaw that we had, and we're going to have a lot of development in commercial air travel. And can you possibly imagine a 747 going from coast to coast, having to get permission from every single landowner along the way? Commercial air travel would not exist if this principle of law, which had been enforced for 700 years, continued. It had no place in the modern world. And so in an instant, this Supreme Court case completely changed 700 years of legal precedence. So that's what I mean, is that it doesn't come as quickly as we'd like. I know that. I feel it as keenly as any of you, I can assure you. But it will come, and it'll come in weird ways that we don't foresee. But the truth is there was far too much of a public good there that we would lose, in terms of, interstate air travel if we allowed this doctrine to stand. And the same thing will happen here. Drones simply have too much value to deliver to us for it to be held back by whatever principle. So, Techenstein is going to come up and brief you about what's happening elsewhere on the planet. And our case study in this case is Canada.
We are pretty far behind at the moment. The Canadians, they have a really simple system. This is a flowchart from their website. It simply states if you have a less than 2 kilogram aircraft and you're flying it commercially, as long as you obey the rules, you don't have to do anything. There's no license required, no certification required, as long as you're saying, scratch that. You have to be qualified to run the aircraft, and then you don't have to apply for any kind of certificate to fly that particular day, as long as it's less than 2 kilograms. Over 2 kilograms, you go to a website, you apply essentially, it's about like 90 days or so, and you get an authorization to fly for your,
20 days.
20
You
days.
have to be 8 kilometers from any urban built-up areas to do the 2 kilogram.
Okay, so
It's okay. Go ahead.
So 8 kilometers from an airport, or from built-up urban areas, okay. But the thing is, those small aircraft or hobbyists don't have to do this, but even a commercial small aircraft can just fly as long as they've been certified to do so and follow the rules. They have quite a simple set of rules, actually. Like don't fly near airports, don't fly for people. It goes right down the list. But the fact that they've got this in place and it works is something that we really have to work on in this country. Now, other countries are trying to establish their own rules. Like Australia has their rules, which is a little bit more like what ours might be right now, where they basically have to apply and you have to take a course, get certified, certify your aircraft, and it takes a long time, a lot of money, and you have to get this expensive, COA just to fly. And of course, America not quite there yet, and other countries are similar, like UK, New Zealand. Anywhere you look, I think Canada is the shining star of this one here. They do it right. Anyway, that's Canada.
Perhaps, yes. Go Canada!
Well, this is on their website, just in case you want to know. It's not legible here, but boy, it's actually very easy to follow a flowchart. If you're going to fly, yes or no, commercial, yes or no, weight, yes or no, and just go right down the list. It's pretty easy.
Maybe someday we will be so lucky. So maybe not so much a shining star as a shining maple leaf, as an honor to our friends to the north. Now on this, I want to say, do not forget, on April 24th, 2015, the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking open comment period for the FAA's current SUS, Small Unmanned Aircraft System, commercial rules closes. Now, I think for the most part, the commercial audience, everyone in this room in some form, I suspect, finds these rules to be good. And so we may, oh, well, we got this one in the bag. No. There are two things wrong with that. One, we're picking up some whispers on the wind that the manned aviation guys, and we certainly have some exceptions here today, thank you, sir, but there are some in the manned aviation community who feel this is going too far too fast. And so if every one of those guys writes in, that's 50,000 no comments and, the 10 of us who bother to do something, and we get killed, even though the FAA even agrees with us. So just because you agree doesn't mean you can't comment. And two other things to be aware of is we lost a lot of support on the special rule for model aircraft, which was the last battle we fought with the FAA last spring, was it? Yeah, it was because here was the problem. Some really well-meaning people wrote up sort of draft letters that, dear FAA, you suck, stop it. And then they said to their friends on the forums, photocopy this, send it into the comment period. And the problem is that this isn't a letter campaign to Congress. The volume doesn't count. It's only the quality. Some poor benighted fool who has an office in the basement, no doubt, has to actually sit down and read every single one of these things. So if we submit 100,000 letters, but they're all word for word the same, that's one comment. So please, please, please take your time, write your own letter. Any day now, the AMA, the Academy of Model Aeronautics, is going to release sort of a guide to help you, sort of tools. You're concerned about this, here are some issues for you to think about. But you have to go through it. You have to write the letter yourself. It has to be your own. Otherwise, it doesn't count. So please write your own letter. And if you see somebody on the forums posting a form letter, please do your best to politely discourage them, because that's not helping us. And then the final thing to keep in mind is that the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking looks reasonably favorable for commercial operations, But the FAA is sticking with their special interpretive rule for model aircraft, which is very, very deleterious to the whole hobby community. It would outlaw, make illegal FPV using goggles. Is that clear to everybody? That would be against the law. That we cannot let that stand. And that's still standing. Now, God bless them, the AMA, the Academy of Model Aeronautics, our good friends there, stood up and sued them to stop that from going into place. But that's still a big issue. So the AMA expects to have you, when you write in, they want you to talk about, this issue and what you like about this proposed commercial rules, but they also want you to say, hey, resolve this special rule for model aircraft. So the fight is not over by a long shot. So please stay on top of this, because we need all of you. This isn't, no one of us can do this alone. And then the third lesson I wish to take from the giants of the days gone by is own the language. It's important how we choose to talk about what we do. The words we use to describe this technology, to describe what we do with it, are critically important. As a card-carrying English major, and yes, I am an actual English major who nonetheless found gainful employment, one of my personal heroes is this guy right here, George Orwell, perhaps most famous for writing the book 1984, or somewhat less so for writing Animal Farm. And the central thesis of his most famous book, 1984, was that if you can control the language, you can control what people can think. If you can control the language, you can control. And he obviously saw this as a sinister tool for, controlling people. I was going to say for Orwellian purposes, but yeah, we kind of got that. So in any event, but people do this all the time. In fact, I saw an example yesterday on the plane getting here. This photograph was taken in my lap on the airplane. Take a close look at this. No doubt all of you saw a similar one. It's a cute little cartoon hand, and it says, keep seatbelts fastened when seatbelt and seated when seatbelt sign is on. Does anyone detect the Orwellian language there? So that's no fair. You work in the industry, but go ahead.
No, but the big problem is you're supposed to have your seatbelt attached at all times.
At all times. Okay, you're supposed to have your seatbelt attached at all times, but even you're falling prey to it. As a card-carrying English major and overall Orwell fan, I'll tell you what I see. I see the word seatbelts. What is a seat belt? Where does that come from? Cars comes from cars. Actually, you're right. So we had seat belts in cars. Why do we have seat belts in cars? We didn't originally have seat belts in cars. We had safety belts in cars. Because if your car came to an abrupt stop, in order to avoid having your brains scattered all over the dashboard, you had to wear your safety belt. The problem was that the auto manufacturers realized if we put safety belts in these things, people are going to realize they're dangerous. We can't have that. We can't have them thinking cars are dangerous. They won't want to buy them. We need a new word. We need a seat belt. So this is not conspiracy stuff. You can read about this. They made up this word so they would not have to remind you of your own mortality when selling you this product. So think about that. And when you choose to describe a piece of technology or an idea related to this, think very carefully about the words you choose to describe that. Because the other side is doing it to us all the time. Don't be mistaken. So, stop calling them drones. This is one we get a lot on the internet because we pretty unashamedly call them drones. And here's what I have to say to that is if there was another word we could call them and anybody would know what we were talking about, I would use it gladly, happily, immediately. The problem is likely more so than most people, we go out in public and use this technology. We go walking down the street with a drone, for lack of a better thing, in our arms. And what we have found, whenever we've run into what I will call a civilian, although we're all civilians, but somebody who wasn't intimately involved with this technology, they always say, "Ooh, is that a drone?" And this is what the public is going to call them. There's no way around that. We can call them aerial camera platforms. We can call them small unmanned aircraft systems. We can call them multi-rotors. Public's, "Ooh, is that a drone?" So what we have to do is we have to defang that serpent. We have to take away the power of that word to mean something negative and make it mean something positive. And that's the power of something like International Drone Day. So that's my 2 cents on that. And then a last thing to think about is if we right now are living in the past of the future that we all want to live in, what choices do we make today to make sure we realize that future? And I would say it's important to begin by recognizing We're stewards of the potential that this technology has to offer. We are the ones who must care for it and nurture it and bring it along so it can achieve that full, robust realization of what it has to deliver. And we are the ones, we are Isaac Newton, we are the guys flying over Cosby's field. By the way, although they said that Acuris's rule was out, the Supreme Court did give Cosby his money for his chickens. So the story does have a happy ending. And I would suggest, to be a worthy steward, we have to do 5 things. We have to always fly in a reasonable, prudent, and safe manner. I don't care what the law says. I don't care what the AMA says. Those are great places to look for guidance, but it's always in here. You have to think, is it reasonable? Is it prudent? Is it safe? If I was a sane person standing 15 feet behind me watching what I am doing, would I think this was a good idea? And as long as you can answer that question yes with a straight face, go for it. Second point. I missed a point. Don't be that guy. And if you are that guy, or I guess that girl is now a possibility, we've got the drone girl in the house, step up, acknowledge your mistake, and promise not to do it again, and mean it. We are all going to make mistakes. It's part of flying. I'm a private pilot. I learned at no doubt an organization was affiliated with yours. And what they tell the private pilots is when you get into trouble, you climb, you communicate, you confess, you comply. You know, you make a mistake, own it, and then move on and try not to repeat that mistake. But the worst thing you could do is damage control, try and cover it up. Just be upfront. No one's gonna, everyone has made mistakes in aviation. Just own it when you do. Try not to make it too serious. Third point, where to skip from. It's always okay not to fly. Particularly for those of you who are moving into the commercial space, you're going to have people who want you to fly really bad because they're burning $10,000 an hour on this set. And Brad Pitt's dismissed from the set tomorrow. Maybe he's going to go back and get his good journalism degree. I don't know, find honest work. Who knows? But the point is, if you don't think it's safe to fly, you don't have to fly. And if anybody ever gives you any guff about that, have them call me. Why not? I'll let it go to voicemail, but you won't have to fly. Contribute to your community, and I can't emphasize the importance of this. Join the AMA. Join your local drone user group. Join Chris's club, which is actually Chris's outfit is now part of the drone user group. So get wherever you are, whatever you live, get out and help. Get out and teach. Get out and do. Join Swarm. Be a part of this community. None of us is going to do this alone. And if you're alone, you're going to get cut off, and it's just not going to go your way, and you're not contributing your strength to us. And we can't do this. Nobody can do this by ourselves. We have to come together and do this as a community. So be part of that community. Be actively engaged. Be committed to it. And finally, be careful what you do. The arbitrary choice you make when you go out flying tomorrow might set the operational standard for the next 100 years. So make it a good one. All right?